But so what I like to do is I like to play a soundbite, Tim, and we want to get into this conversation because today we know this week, State Department they made an announcement that there is a genocide that's going on over in the Middle East, and the Christians are a part of that, but they also named some other groups. But I want you to give us some information that you have about what's going on. All right, so Derek, if you can play soundbite 242, please.
My purpose in appearing before you today is to assert that in my judgment, Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups in areas under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims. Daesh is genocidal by self-proclamation, by ideology, and by actions. Daesh is also responsible for crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing directed at these same groups, and in some cases also against Sunni Muslims, Kurds, and other minorities.
Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters applauded Kerry for the admission, but still felt it came off weak.
My belief is that the government still doesn't have much sympathy with the destruction of 2,000 years of Christian civilization in the Middle East. Now, the administration was shamed into this. They were forced into accepting this obvious genocide as genocide. But, Bill, look at what Kerry said. Listen to what he said. He said not just Christians, also Yazidis. That's true. That's valid. Then he includes the hundreds of millions of Shia Muslims. Shia and Sunni Muslims in the Middle East are in a great Islamic civil war. But by diluting it, by diluting the genocide, that means there's less pressure on them to take in Christian refugees. The other problem, and the really biggest one and ugliest one, is he limited it to ISIS, to Daesh. And it's not just them. It's not just ISIS. This destruction that's been accelerating for years of Christian civilization in the Middle East, it's also Al-Qaeda, it's Jabhat al-Nusra, it's Hamas, it's Hezbollah, it's even to an extent the Muslim Brotherhood. And so Kerry and the administration made the smallest, tiniest statement they could make on genocide. Basically, yeah, it's genocide, but look at this, this, and this, and we're really not going to do anything.
Thank you very much. All right, so that's our opening. And thank you, Tim, for joining the Abolitionist Roundtable. And I'm going to let you open up, Tim, on your comment on this, and then we're going to bring the roundtable in.
Del, when we listen to the statement by Secretary Kerry, on the one hand, it's good because at least the government has recognized it.
Yes.
But it's been going on for years.
Yes.
And why has it taken this long to call it genocide? In the one website that I'm on, on international persecution of Christians, they give 4 reasons why leaders refuse or fear the genocide word. Reason number 1, it creates an international legal duty to protect the targeted people, groups, and prevent genocidal campaigns. 2, traditionally, the crime of genocide could only be carried out by state actors, like, for example, World War II with Nazi Germany. Jihadists like ISIS and others are not state actors, therefore we don't have to give them that justification. They're not part of the state, they're individual acts. 3, many think that genocide labels can only attach when millions of people have already been murdered. In other words, it's not an issue of intent, it's number. In reality, genocide is the other way around. It is the intent. And that has been clearly given by, in the Middle East, primarily Muslim attacks. But according to Voice of the Martyrs on their persecution map of the world where persecution of Christians occurs, out of 50 major countries, 40 are Muslim. In fact, Muslim-dominated countries. 10 are not. The leading Christian persecutor in the world is not Muslim. It's North Korea. And so as we look at our world today, and you've been talking about what's happening in the Middle East, let's start in Bethlehem, the very birthplace of the Lord Jesus. And in Bethlehem, that at one time had 85% of its population as Christian, today is less than 15% Christian. What changed when the Palestinian Authority began to rule and Muslim influence increased and dominated? The attack on Christians increased as well. In Gaza, there was a Baptist pastor who ran a Christian bookstore as well as pastored his church. He was kidnapped and murdered, leaving his wife as a widow and 3 orphaned children. And then we look at Bethlehem. There is First Baptist Church pastor, Dr. Naim Corey, who has had his church firebombed 14 times.
Oh, my goodness.
And he refuses to leave. His son pastors in East Jerusalem at Calvary Baptist Church and is speaking out actually at the UN on behalf of Christians in the Middle East. The downside, as we look at the persecution, and the numbers are staggering. When you hear of millions of refugees, in fact, our own government, there are over 300 Iraqi refugees in California still waiting to be processed and allowed to be brought into our country. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees, many of them Muslim, are being ushered in freely to our country and many other countries as well. And so the Christian persecution has expanded and exploded. We've seen it and as we were visiting together last night, we've seen it in Sudan. We've seen it in Nigeria with Boko Haram. The new president of Nigeria has said that he wants to attack and eliminate Nigeria of Boko Haram. And yet it seems that almost daily a new extremist group comes on the scene, a new one saying they're not extreme enough, they're not Muslim enough, and so we have to be more violent.
Yeah.
We see these people indeed destroying thousands of years of history and civilization and destroying it and bludgeoning it with their hammers and their sledgehammers, and proudly saying that they are getting rid of this idolatry.
Yes.
And
Matter of
so
fact,
we're
if you hold on right there for a minute, Tim, I just pulled this up, and this is from I don't know if you know about it. This is from the Gospel Herald, and then Phil want to ask you a question. It says this is from the Gospel Herald. It says video: ISIS burning hundreds of Christian books, textbooks, in an attempt to erase religion from Middle East. And so they're having book burners right now. A distributor of a new video showing Islamic State militants burning Christian texts in an attempt to erase all Christian religion other than Islam from their society in Mosul, Iraq, a region where thousands of Christians once called home. And so even recently, this just happened this week, they just recently had a book burning.
It's one way to get rid of opposing philosophy and thought. If you want to dominate, you eliminate.
Yes.
And that's exactly what they're trying to do. Nazi Germany did the same thing. As they rose to power, they began to burn the books of those that were considered non-Aryan and certainly didn't endorse the philosophy of the Nazi Party.
You're right. This is very similar to what happened there. Matter of fact, if you don't mind, Phil would like to get in the conversation also.
I just want to know who is representing the Christians in the in the United States and in the Western world. I mean, how is it that millions of Syrians can get out of Syria and get into safe territory, but the Christians are locked in? They can't get any aid to allow them to protect themselves, and they can't get out. Who's representing their interests?
I think it's a fair question. One of the things when you're looking at it, Phil, you have government agencies, international government agencies. Let's start there. You have United Nations that assist. In fact, it was the United Nations that specified to the president exactly how many refugees the United States of America ought to bring in. And I think that's an important aspect.
And on that term of refugees, there's a special designation for refugees that allow them out of Syria into the various countries.
That's true.
Has the Christians, the Yazidis particularly, been designated as refugees? And because, look, even down in Mexico, people that are within areas where drug lords are ruling are granted refugee status, and they get out. But nobody has given a path to them. I've even heard that the refugee camps are void of Christians because they are afraid to be in with the Muslims. They are actually killing them in the camps.
I heard that too.
You're exactly right. In fact, there was a case as refugees, joint Muslim and Christians, were leaving one country. On the boat on which they were sailing, Muslims saw a young boy praying, and he wasn't praying to Allah.
Yeah.
They surrounded him, threw him overboard, and eventually on that cruise, on that sailing, over 50 Christians were thrown overboard by Muslims.
Wow.
So you're exactly right. There is a fear of joint Christian-Muslim refugee. So who represents the Christian? They get United Nations, the Muslims get United Nations, not that same support for Christians.
We're going to have to...
There are individual Christian organizations. I can give you two specific...
Well, hold on just a minute, Tim.